Alrighty, thought I'd give y'all a little bit of an update for the handful of y'all that have been keeping up with this 1981 GMC square body. I call it a build or what all I'm doing, but and those that are keeping up with the engine swap. Just thought I'd try to give y'all. I hadn't posted a video in a while, but give y'all an update on where I am with the motor. I'm actually tearing it down today off the test stand here. So let me flip this camera around and we'll go over it. Okay, hopefully I got two fans in here running. Hopefully it don't mess the audio up too much. But yeah, here it is. It's on the stand. It's probably got about 40 minutes of runtime on it now. This has drug out longer than I had anticipated. But the break-in run, the cam break-in all, I think went well. I did run into some issues after the first 20 minutes of running. When I first was able to get to a point where I could idle the engine, I discovered some things, and that led to one thing to another, and then what I thought was going to be a headache that really ain't. But anyway, like I said, I'm already part way through tearing it down this morning. The carburetor's sitting there, and I've got pieces, parts, and stuff everywhere. I'm trying to drain coolant. I went ahead and put coolant in the motor. So, let's see. I guess, yeah, probably goes back that far before I even started it. I put, when I got it on the test stand, I got this radiator on here, which is not an ideal location. It needs to be up here somewhere, but it worked for what I did. I just wasn't able to run it more than about 4 or 5 minutes a run. I was watching the head temperature here with a little infrared thermometer, and I had a gauge here that I was watching on this sensor here. I don't have one here in the head yet. I'm going to rob the one out of that 327 and put in here. But anyway, when I first got on the stand, I put water in the system just to look for leaks. I thought it was a good idea, and I was just going to run water in it originally. But anyway, I did have 2 leaks, and they were both back here. What you call freeze plug. Some people back in the day will argue that's not technically a freeze plug. That was more of a hole used in the casting of the motors to get sand and stuff. I guess the process of casting. But anyway, you can see I've put I had to pull the freeze plugs out. This one was a bit of a disaster, as you can see. It fought me tooth and nail. The other one, this one came out easy. I did it first, and then this one fought me. But anyway, on both sides they leaked. They had no sealant on them whatsoever, which that is a debated thing too. But it was interesting when I had those off. Of course, I had this flywheel written on here when I did this, but when I had that off, I could see, if I can show it to you, there's a freeze plug right there at the end of my finger. I could see, well, and you can even see right off my fingernails a little bit of gray sealant. But I could see that plug from inside here just barely, and you could see the sealant on the inside of it. So why they put sealant on all the other plugs and didn't put any on these 2 on the back, I'm not exactly sure. But in any case, they were just a little drop here and there, water coming out. And it did that for about a week. I watched it until I drained it and knocked those out and replaced them. But Uh, when I had those plugs out, I used a little vacuum hose and siphoned out the water out of the block, because it dawned on me. I thought, and I should, but I can't get them broke loose. There's 2 plugs on each side of the block right down here. You can pull out and drain the block. It's an Allen head in there. I was gonna break my Allen wrench before I could get that out. It's in there really tight. So I siphoned all the water I could out of the block. So when I went to fill it again, I did put antifreeze in it, because I thought, well, if I can't get it all out, I want to make sure I got, a 50-50 mixture of coolant in there at least, so I don't have some unknown amount of water running around in the block. But anyway, my dipstick, I pulled it out a while ago. I've got to take that off. So I'm taping things off as I go here, heater hoses and stuff. But yeah, I run into that freeze plug issue leaking, so fixed that. And then pretty much started getting everything together. I've got an issue here with this bracket not lining up with this hole, but it's funny, the bracket lines up perfectly otherwise. The belt's straight, as you can see, everything, so I'm gonna wind up notching this, using a bolt and a washer here. I could try to get another one of these, but there's no knowing how I'm gonna line this up. And there's differences in these water pumps too, and from what I can tell, they're the same. What do they call that? Was it a short pump and a long pump or something like that? I think this is the long, because you can get your fingers in between it and the timing cover, but you can that in over there too, which is where this bracket came from. So I'm suspecting this hole's off a little bit, because this intake is not the best, but it is what it is. Because I have another issue I run into where my distributor is not, you're not going to be able to see it here, but my distributor is ever so slightly not flush right here. And I'm going to go to a cork gasket there to seal that up, but I don't think this intake is, the quality is the machining isn't exactly what it should be. I think it's just a Chinese made Jegs intake, but other than that, no issues with it. Now, like I said, I think I've said before, I had this intake off because I had to redo these end seals. Somebody didn't get those end seals right. Yeah, I think I've showed that before. I had those laying here where this was where they originally did the end seals, and as you can see, they settled before the intake, so there was gaps, areas that didn't seal up top to bottom. Anyway, so those were all gremlins I ran into before I even fired it. But yeah, I got on this test stand, got an electric pump down there, so I was sure to have fuel to the carburetor. Two of the gauges were dead on arrival, and then this RPM gauge died about 2 or 3 minutes into the first run. So the gauges that came with this test stand were junk, and I say that because I took, I believe, the oil pressure. I took one of these two apart that came with it, and it was literally the cheapest thing I've seen. I mean, it was really bad. There was things shorting out in there that shouldn't have been, and yeah. But I had read in reviews on these, people saying, buy you a good set of gauges when you get it, because the ones that come with it ain't even good. So there you go. But anyway, I had these. I had this oil pressure gauge out of a kit, which is actually a mechanical gauge, not an electric gauge. Then I had this gauge I had not bought long ago, but I'm using it on a different sensor. So I'm not sure that the scale was exactly right, but it gave me a ballpark number. And like I said, I used an infrared camera on here to kind of watch my temperature here, here at the head. So pretty much when the head hit 200, I shut it down, which had me, you know, in the 180, 90 range here. I also would look here and see what this was reading here at the radiator coming through this hose. But yeah, so we did the break-in, which was 20 minutes total run time, running it, you know, 2,000 RPM and upward. I was varying the RPM. I actually had and I took it off a while ago. I built me a throttle linkage right here. I had it tied to the screw. It had me a handle here and a rod going over to the carburetor, and I could stand here and run the throttle and whatnot. But I turned the screw in the carburetor, the idle screw up, because I knew when the choke kicked on there on that, it'd run around 1,500 RPM, so I cranked it up a little bit. So when I did get the first start, when it rested on that screw, it was at 1,800, so it wasn't going to go below that. But anyway, all that worked out. Got that 20 minutes on it. Then I brought it down, let it idle very briefly right after that 20 minutes, just to hear it, and I shut it down. I did the oil change. I did go with a Lucas break-in oil for that first 20 minutes. And I also have an oil filter screen in. I had it in. There's the Fram oil filter that the guy gave me. I don't like Frams, but I used it anyway because it's just 20 minutes of running. But that oil filter screen in there, it's back in this Wix filter I got on here now. And I've took that off once, I've looked at that screen about 3 times. You know, I had I took it off after the first 5 minutes of running, and I had some fine fiber material like rag stuff, little bits of, it was just little bits of mostly just trash. The only other thing that I seen, I ran a magnet over it, didn't really pick up hardly anything. There was some just a small amount of final stuff, but I think that's pretty much normal. I hope so. Wasn't nothing excessive, nothing big. But I had some little bits, little flakes of aluminum. And I believe the pistons in this are aluminum. Other than the head being aluminum, which nothing's going to flake there, would be the aluminum here on this distributor. And I've had it out a few times looking at it, but those have kind of died down. The couple of times I've looked at that screen, they've about kind of gone away. So, and I had the engine, I had to redo the oil pan gasket, and I wound up putting a new oil pan on it in that process. Because it's sitting here in the garage, I had a leak of oil out the front and the back, which turned out to be, I think it had the wrong thickness oil pan gaskets on it. And then I bought a one-piece gasket, and the original oil pan, you know, I don't know if it was original this motor, but the oil pan I got with it was bent around all the screw holes that had been tightened down, and you can't have that with the one-piece gasket the way those work, so I had to get a new oil pan. But what I was saying was, I had the engine flipped upside down before all this to redo that, and I had a chance to look in the motor and add some more assembly lube to the cam and some things. And I seen some small pieces of aluminum then. So I think they might have been coming off these pistons maybe where they wouldn't clean good or whatever. But it was very tiny. Like I said, they wouldn't stick to magnets, had to be aluminum. But Anyway, it seems to be dying down, whatever it is, and it wasn't a lot to begin with, so I think that's kind of cleaned itself out now. But anyway, after that 20 minutes, I went back and put another jug of the same stuff, brake-in oil, and that's what's in it right now. And that's gonna stay in there for, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 or 500 miles, whatever I decide. I'm gonna keep running that brake-in oil in it. After I do the next drain and filter change, I'm gonna go back to it's gonna be a Lucas oil like this, but it'll be a 1030. I think they call it hot rod oil or something. It's basically conventional oil with zinc, and you know, the proper amount of zinc for normal operation. It's not a brake-in oil. But anyway, so got through that 20 minutes, which took me most of the day running it for 4 or 5 minutes at a time, shutting it down. I let it cool. I let it go through a heat cycle pretty much. Then fire it up again, do that same process. But anyway, when I got to that point later, which was a whole nother day, I think, I ran it some more, and I kept it running at higher RPMs, but I'd come down, let it idle just briefly, and then run it back up. I'd put my vacuum gauge right here on there, and at RPMs, I forget where it was, but it was steady. It was pulling vacuum. But when I'd let it idle, this needle was just unreadable. It was all over. I mean, it was just all over the place. It was trying, if you looked at it long enough, trying to stay somewhere here, but it was just all over the place. And I didn't know what to make of that at first. And I had it hooked to manifold vacuum, so it was reading vacuum off intake manifold, not poured it off the car. I believe I said that right. So I did some research on that, and the main thing showed up there was valve adjustment. So there was a valve adjustment issue. I was like, well, it's running, you know. Didn't think much about it, other than when I was doing that first 20 minutes of break-in. If I gave it some throttle and let off, it would sometimes backfire. And I had a couple of times starting it where it backfired up through the carburetor. So I got to thinking about that, and I thought, you know, if a valve isn't seating and a spark plug sparks, you know, it could ignite the fuel mixture up through the intake. And likewise out the exhaust, backfiring that way. So then it started to add up to me that sure enough, I had a valve adjustment issue. So I had a compression tester that I've had for probably 6 or 7 years here, that was brand new. So I got it was out the farm, brought it out here, had good compression on number 1, had no compression on these 3, and then I had good compression on all those on that side of the engine. So I'm like, wow, that's really bad, all 3 of these. So I pulled this valve cover, and this thing's got adjustable roller rockers in it, and I used a straight edge, basically a level, and went across all the nuts. All the nuts that tighten it down should be all approximately setting about the same height. And sure enough, all of these were way tighter than the first 2, and these were all similar. They were a little off, but anyway, that told me I had a valve adjustment issue. So wound up going through that process, did every cylinder individually, did what they call the ICE method. So Oh, I wrote it down here somewhere. You got the intake starts to close, you adjust and set your exhaust. Exhaust starts to open, you adjust and set your intake. So I did some research on what I should. So you've got where you adjust your rockers to zero lash, which that's pretty easy, self-explanatory thing, where you don't have any up and down movement in your rod going to your lifter. And I did that, but the other question was how much preload to put on it, which means after zero lash, how much tighter do you tighten the rocker? And I wound up first adjustment, I did half a turn and locked them. When I locked them, I locked the inner Allen and the nut, so I went probably about another eighth of a turn. So a half plus an eighth. And did all of them that way, buttoned it all back up, put everything back on, ran it, fired up great, ran a lot better than it did during the break-in. But and I never did have any more of the backfires or anything back up to the carb. All that was gone. And the vacuum was steady at idle. Vacuum, in my RPM gate, my attack went out, so I really don't know where I was in RPMs. I just turned the screw down till I felt like, if I go much further, it's gonna die. So it was running pretty low RPM, and I was probably running 15 to 16 on the vacuum. Was this in pounds of mercury or something? I forget the vacuum units, but anyway, you give it just a hair bit of throttle and it'd jump up here, at 18, 19, 20, which is where it should be. So I proved the valve adjustment problem. But right after it warmed up, which I was kind of revving it up a little bit while it was warming up, and I didn't notice this, but I'd let it idle, I'd hear ticking, or what I'd call valve train chatter, I thought, on this side of the engine. I didn't hear it on this side of the engine. But I adjusted everything the same. So I thought, well, I've either done one of them wrong or I did something not right. So I shut it down. I spent about a week, 4 days thinking that through because I was trying to figure out, I thought I had adjusted it properly, but I had this chatter at idle. Now, as soon as I gave it a little throttle, one way, didn't hear it, and it was odd. I did some video of that on my phone, and you could put your head down in this area and it was louder, but it wasn't loud up here. All I could hear it. I posted the video to a group on Facebook, and they said I had an exhaust leak. Because in the video, it sounded different than what I was hearing in person. Of course, here in person, there's a lot going on. I've got the exhaust, the engine's running, I had the fans going, it was just hard to tell. But somehow the audio on the phone was more discernible, that you could hear a kind of almost a put sound. I relate it to, the sound of an old two-cylinder John Deere. But to me, it sounded like something in the valve train. So I did some more research and reading on valve adjustments and determined that I didn't do my preload enough, more than likely. This is a comp cam, should have the matching, at least that's what I was told, the matching comp hydraulic lifters in it. And I knew what the cam was, so I found the spec on the cam, which led me to the matching lifters. And comp's recommendation is to have 45 thousandths preload, or one turn of the rocker nut on the lifter. And then some other things I read was you could be anywhere between 45 and 60 thousandths. So what I did was I went through every one of them again. This time I loosened every one of them up. I made sure that the lifters had either kind of bled down or relaxed, because there's a spring in the lifter. And if it ain't got any oil in it, so it's not hydrolocked per se, you can push down on that rod a little bit and feel it go in. But anywho, went through, readjusted them all to one turn this time, and reading off the top of this head here with my calipers and the top of the rocker as close as I could to the center point of the rod on the rocker. I was really close to that 45, 50 thousandths, the best I could tell. Yeah, you really needed a, what is it called? There's another measurement tool that's kind of like this, a gay, what is that thing called? Anyway, if you know what I'm talking about, that's what, I don't have one, but that's what you really needed to set up on each one to get that adjustment just right. But anyway, I went through, did them all one turn this time, rechecked compression on all of them, good equal compression on all of them, ran it again, it ran great, vacuum was good again, but I had that chatter again over here. And that's actually when I did the video. I was mistaken a while ago. I did the video on it after that because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So everybody was all, it's exhaust leak. So what I wound up doing, I took a piece of vacuum hose, I could stick it in my ear. I pulled this PCV valve off and I could stick in there, didn't hear anything. But I stuck it right down in here. I have the exhaust leak between 4 and 6 cylinders. And I actually got down there and you can see a slight bit of carbon buildup right between the head, these two ports, exhaust ports here. And that was making a sound that almost mimicked something chattering, but it was the exhaust leak out of here. So I'll be tearing this all apart here in a little bit. I'll be looking at that a little closer. But oddly enough, these are the same headers that came off the 327 here. Exhaust leak, same spot. You can see it. You see how clean these other ports are. The exhaust leak. So this flange is probably warped. I've been debating replacing these headers anyway because this one right here has been in, you can't see it. Enough light, you might can see that is dented in where it has hit the U-joint on the front drive shaft of the truck. And these aren't the right headers. I got a part number, there's a part number stamped on the inside. These are for like a Nova. Now they fit, but these would probably work great on a two-wheel drive truck, maybe. But anyway, this is a problem for the four-wheel drive. If you look at headers for this pipe doesn't. This pipe is more back this way. All of these are more back this way because you got drive line right in here. So I'm looking at going with another set. I'm gonna, even if I kept these, I'm gonna have to grind me a notch there because it's hitting that plug. Of course, I'm probably gonna put temperature sensor in right here and same deal. But anyway, so after discovering that, and checking the engine, pulling the oil filter again, looking at the screen, running it, vacuum's good now. It fires right up. It starts really nicely. I mean, it's just a bump of the key and boom. I mean, it seems to all be good. Fingers crossed, I hope. I don't like that some of these rockers were too tight holding the valves open, because that means it was putting more pressure on those cam lobes probably during break-in, but hopefully it didn't hurt anything there. Like I said, nothing's indicating it did, so hopefully the cam's all right. But all I know to do now, like I said, tear this thing down, get it off this test stand, get it back on a cradle like I got that now, and start getting this thing ready to carry out to the farm and throw it back in the truck. I do have a new flywheel clutch assembly. That's the old one, so I'm gonna take that off before I can pull off the stand. The radiator, I've been debating. It don't leak. Another test I did to it the other night, it was kind of the final test. I did a pressure test on the cooling system. I started not to do it because the tool for it, they range from like 130, 150 bucks. And it's nothing but a little air pump and a pressure gauge and a special cap you put on here, and you just pump that thing up. And you see if you have any leaks in the system, if it leaks down or not. But I did find where I could rent one from O'Reilly's, so I rented one. So you just have to pay for it, bring it back, and get your money back. So it didn't really cost me anything in the end. But I did a pressure test. This is a 15 to 16 pound cap. I did test this cap. It won't hold over. Once you get to 16, 17, it leaks back down to below 15. It won't hold anything. So I pressurized the system to 15 and held it, and it didn't leak down. So coolant system appears to be good. And you know, after the break-in and everything, so head gaskets, hopefully everything's good. It never smoked once. The exhaust was really clean every time I ran it. The plugs didn't look bad. I've had the plugs out every time I did the valve adjustment because I was having to rotate the engine over by hand. But anyway, yeah, that's where we are. I've got video of it running. This video here is getting kind of long, so I may piece together some clips of me running it off and on. Just be aware if you hear the backfires or anything, and the early ones, that's before I got the valves adjusted. Like I said, I thought they were adjusted right when I got it. I think the guy told me they were, but they weren't. So anyway, it is what it is. I've had to touch a lot of things on this motor that I thought I wouldn't have to touch, including the intake, the oil pan gate, you know, all that. I did put fuel pump was not on it when I got it. I put a fuel pump on it. Of course, I ran it off that electric pump down there for all this. I've got new motor mounts going in. Transmission's back in the truck. Don't know if I've mentioned that yet. I did wind up having a small leak on the front of it, like very small. Matter of fact, I think it was just seeping through the paper of the gasket. But I went ahead and drained some of the oil out of it, and why I could get to it easily, redid that gasket and sealant and everything. So I did that last week, and I'll check on that tomorrow because it's out at the farm. That looks good because I put oil back in it last week. That looks good. I'll be ready to get the bell housing on and the clutch fork, throw out bearing, all that great stuff. But yeah, I'm debating on the radiator. This radiator I have blown and washed and blown and washed, and it is full of some kind of grass seed. And I have tried to clean this out. It keeps coming out. It's a is it a 1 row, 2 row? I think it's 2. But I've been debating whether to put another radiator in or not while I got this one out. As I'm thinking about changing these radiator hoses out and putting new ones on and keeping these as spares. But again, I'm just debating. This radiator doesn't leak, but I also want to make sure I keep this thing cool. In this setup, with that one of those fans blowing on it, like I said, I didn't feel like it was going to keep it cool, so that's why I would only run it for short periods of time, because I feel like this was building up pressure and steam, because this was the highest point, where in reality the radiator needed to be up higher, and that'd be the highest point to flow right. But anyway, it is what it is. I guess I'll shut up now. But I just wanted to give an update on those, the small few of you that even watched this video this far, of what I've gone through on this motor before it leaves here and goes in the truck. So fingers crossed it's healthy and good, and will run well for a long time, but we will see. Anywho, there's your update. I'm gonna keep tearing this down. Thanks for watching. See ya.